What if the darkness in the Appalachian woods is more than just a shadow, something patient, clever, and always just out of sight? Tonight you'll hear the stories that locals won't share after sundown, the kind that crawl beneath your skin and make you question every whisper in the wind. Every twisted tree and haunted hollow holds secrets waiting to be discovered. Keep watching, because by the end, you might find the forest is watching you right back. Join the Haunted Fears horror family. Hit subscribe and step deeper into the unknown. Have you ever looked into the eyes of something that shouldn't exist? I have, and I wish to God I hadn't. My name is Alistair, and I've been driving these Ohio back roads for 15 years. I thought I'd seen everything these Appalachian foothills could throw at me. Fog thick as soup, deer that appear out of nowhere, the occasional drunk stumbling home from the bar. But what I saw that October night in Mesopotamia Township changed everything I thought I knew about what's possible. It was past midnight when I rounded the bend on Route 534. My headlights caught them first, two figures standing beside a sedan pulled halfway onto the shoulder. The car's hazards weren't on, which struck me as odd. As I slowed down, my truck's high beams illuminated them fully, and that's when my stomach dropped. They were a couple, I think, both wearing clothes that seemed wrong for the season, summer attire in late October. But it wasn't their clothes that made me grip the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. It was their faces. Too pale. Bone white, like they'd been drained of blood. Their eyes were opened so wide I could see white all around the irises, and they weren't blinking, not once. They just stood there, facing the road, facing me, completely motionless. Her mouth was open slightly, frozen mid-breath. I should have kept driving. Every instinct screamed at me to press the gas and get the hell out of there. But something made me stop. Maybe it was 15 years of helping stranded motorists. Maybe it was just stupid human curiosity. I rolled down my window. "You folks need help?" Nothing. They didn't move, didn't acknowledge me. Their eyes stayed fixed on some point past my truck, like they were looking at something I couldn't see. Her hair didn't move, despite the wind that had picked up, whistling through the trees. "Hello?" I tried again, louder this time. His head turned. Not his body, just his head, rotating slowly like it was on a mechanism. When his eyes locked onto mine, I felt ice flood my veins. There was no recognition there, no humanity, just a vast, empty nothing that seemed to pull at something deep inside me. I don't remember putting the truck in drive. I don't remember speeding away. The next thing I knew, I was 5 miles down the road, heart hammering, hands shaking so badly I had to pull over. I sat there for 20 minutes trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe I'd been more tired than I thought. Maybe the fog had played tricks with the light, but I knew better. I should have gone straight home. Instead, 3 hours later, as dawn started breaking, I found myself driving back to that spot. I needed to see it in daylight, needed proof that I'd lost my mind or that there was some rational explanation. The sedan was still there. Same position, driver's door hanging open, but no people. I parked and approached slowly, my boots crunching on gravel. The car was covered in dew, like it had been sitting there for days, not hours. The inside was empty, no registration, no personal items, nothing. Just an overwhelming smell of copper and something else, something organic and wrong. That's when I noticed the footprints. They led from the car into the woods, 2 sets, side by side. Perfect. Too perfect. The spacing between each step was identical, like they'd been measured. I followed them, telling myself I'd only go a few yards in. The footprints circled trees. Not randomly. They went around each trunk exactly 3 times before moving to the next one. Clockwise. Always clockwise. My skin crawled as I followed the pattern deeper into the woods. The morning birds had gone silent. Even the wind had died. Then I saw them, standing among the birch trees, maybe 30 yards ahead. The same 2 figures, same positions, same wide-eyed stares. But now I could see there were more. 5, no, 7 others scattered through the woods, all standing perfectly still, all with those bone-white faces and dead eyes. They formed a circle, and I was walking right into the center of it. I froze. One of them, the man from the road, had his head turned toward me. His mouth began to open, wider and wider, unhinging like a snake's jaw. No sound came out, but I felt something in my chest tighten, like invisible hands were squeezing my lungs. I ran. Branches tore at my face and jacket. My boots slipped on wet leaves. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no pursuit. Just that suffocating silence. When I burst out of the tree line and reached my truck, I didn't look back. I gunned the engine and drove. I reported it to the police. They found the abandoned car and towed it. Turned out it had been stolen from a parking lot in Cleveland 2 weeks earlier. No prints, no DNA, nothing useful. The owner said she'd never been to Mesopotamia Township in her life. The footprints, the officers said I must have been mistaken. There were no footprints in those woods, just undisturbed leaf litter. But I know what I saw. I know what I followed. That was 3 years ago. I don't drive that route anymore, even though it adds 40 minutes to my deliveries. And I've started seeing them in other places, standing in parking lots at dusk, at the edges of rest stops, always in pairs or groups, always watching with those empty eyes. Last week I saw them in my rearview mirror, standing in the middle of the road I'd just passed. When I looked again, they were gone. But I know they're following me, getting closer. Each time I see them, they're a little nearer than before. My wife says I'm paranoid, that I need to see someone. Maybe she's right. But she doesn't understand. I've looked into their eyes. I've seen what's behind them, or rather what isn't. And now I think they've seen something in me too, something they want. I don't know what happens when they finally catch up to me. I don't know what they are or what they want. All I know is that every night, when I close my eyes, I see those faces. Those perfect, unblinking, bone-white faces. And somewhere out there in the Appalachian darkness, I know they're still standing, still waiting, still watching, always watching. My father's voice has been calling from the mine for 37 years. He's been dead for 38. My name is Malaysia, and I need you to understand something right from the start. I'm not crazy. I know how this sounds. I know what people think when I tell them. But I lived through it, and the phone records don't lie. Neither do the police reports, even if they buried them deep enough that most folks never heard the truth. It started in November 1987. I was 16 years old, living in Harlan County, Kentucky, where coal mining wasn't just work. It was life and death, and everything in between. My father had worked the mines since he was 18, knew every tunnel, every shaft, every dangerous pocket of gas that could blow if you weren't careful. He went down for a routine inspection one Tuesday morning and never came back up. The company sent search teams. For 2 weeks, they combed every inch of those tunnels. They found his lunch pail, still full, sitting on a support beam 2 miles in. His hard hat was next to it, light still functioning, but no sign of him. No blood, no clothing, no body. Nothing that explained where a 200-pound man could disappear to in a sealed tunnel system. My mother stopped eating, stopped sleeping. She'd sit by the window in our kitchen, staring at the mine entrance visible on the hillside, waiting for something that wouldn't come. Then, 2 weeks and 3 days after he vanished, the phone rang. It was 2:47 in the morning. I remember because the clock on the stove burned that time into my brain. My mother answered, and I heard her gasp. She went white as paper, the receiver shaking in her hand. "It's him," she whispered. "It's your father." I grabbed the phone, and it was. That voice, deep and rough from years of smoking, with that particular way he pronounced my name with 2 syllables instead of 3. "Malaysia, baby girl, I need you to let me in. It's so cold down here. Please, baby girl, I'm at the door. Just open it." I looked at the front door. Through the window, I could see our porch, Empty. No one there. "Daddy, where are you?" My voice cracked. "At the door, baby. Can't you see me?" "I can see you. You're wearing your blue nightgown, the one with the flowers. Your mama's behind you. Please, it hurts down here. It's so dark. Let me in." He was right about the nightgown, right about my mother standing behind me. But when I looked through that window, our porch was empty. I could see clear across to the road. Nothing moved. No one stood there. "Daddy, I don't see you." His voice changed, got sharper, more insistent. "Look harder. I'm right here. I've been standing here for hours. The cold's in my bones, Malaysia. The dark's getting in. Let me in before it's too late." My mother grabbed the phone from me. "Where are you? Tell me exactly where you are." Static crackled through the line. Then his voice came back, but wrong this time. Layered, like multiple recordings playing at once. "In the deep place, where the coal remembers, where it's always been waiting. Let me in. Let me in. Let me in." The line went dead. We called the police. They came, took statements, but you could see in their eyes they thought grief was making us hear things. Until they checked with the phone company. The call had come from inside the mine, specifically from a sealed section 2.5 miles underground. A section that had been abandoned for 15 years, with no working phone lines, no electricity, nothing. The police went down with company engineers, found an old rotary phone in that sealed section, hanging on the wall, covered in coal dust. When they tested it, the line was dead. Hadn't been functional since 1972, but their equipment showed a call had been placed from that exact phone to our house at 2:47 a.m. They sealed the section again and told us not to talk about it. But the calls didn't stop. Once a month, always between 2 and 3 a.m., our phone would ring. His voice, asking to be let in, always with details he shouldn't know, what I was wearing, what room I was in, what my mother was doing. Sometimes he'd describe things in the house we'd just changed. Once, he described my new haircut I'd gotten that very afternoon. We changed our number. He called the new one. We moved to a different house. He called there too. Always the same message. "Let me in." "I'm at the door. Can't you see me? It's so cold down here." My mother couldn't take it. By the time I was 18, she'd had a complete breakdown. They put her in a facility in Lexington. She died there 3 years later, still talking about hearing him knocking on walls, begging to come home. I moved away. Got as far from Kentucky as I could. But every few months, wherever I am, my phone rings in the middle of the night. And it's him. That voice I'd know anywhere, asking why I won't let him in. I've had the calls analyzed. Voice recognition software confirms it's him. Not a recording. Live speech patterns. Real-time responses to things I say. But that's impossible. He's been dead for 37 years. Last month, I made a mistake. I was weak, tired, grieving the anniversary of my mother's death. When he called, I asked him something only my real father would know. The name of the stray dog we found when I was 7, the one we kept secret from the neighbors. There was a long pause. Then he answered, correctly. "Copper," he said. "We named him Copper because of his eyes." And then he said something that turned my blood to ice. "I never left the mine, baby girl. None of us did. We're all still here, in the deep place, where the coal's been waiting longer than Kentucky's had a name. And it's getting so full now, so crowded. We need more room. We need to come up. We need to come home." "We," I whispered. "All of us. Everyone who ever went down and didn't come back. We're ready now. The coal's taught us how. We know the way. We just need someone to open the door." I hung up, but before the line went dead, I heard it. In the background of his call, dozens of voices, hundreds, all whispering the same thing. "Let us in. Let us in. Let us in." The mine company sealed those shafts with concrete 6 months ago, said it was a safety measure, but I know the truth. They heard it too. That chorus of voices rising from the deep place, getting louder every year. My phone's ringing right now as I finish writing this. It's 2:47 a.m. I'm not going to answer. I'm never going to answer again, but I can hear him anyway, whispering from somewhere far below, and this time, I think he's getting closer to the surface. The headlights slice through the darkness, painting the empty road in brief flashes of white and gold. Everything looked normal until something stepped across the pavement, and normal wasn't an option anymore. My name is Mariana. If you've ever driven Route 119 near Grafton, West Virginia, late at night, maybe you know that feeling, the sudden certainty that you're not alone on the road, even if the world seems deserted for miles. Truckers share stories. Old-timers shake their heads and say it's best to take the main highway instead. Most folks laugh it off. I laugh too, until the seventh night. It started as routine, hauling lumber out of Grafton, loading up around midnight, clearing the city limits before 1 a.m. That patch of highway always felt colder than the rest. Something about the air, dense and metallic, pressed against the windows even when the heater blasted. The landscape was nothing but woods, gnarled sycamores tangled over the ditches, the hills rising on either side, the sort of deep black that eats headlights whole. My first encounter was a flicker, quick enough to make me question what I'd seen. Something pale, so pale it almost glowed, lurched across the road a few hundred yards ahead, massive and shapeless. No arms, no head, just bulk, moving slow and purposeful. By the time I reached the spot, all that was left were faint scuff marks on the asphalt, like something had dragged itself across on its belly. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was fog, or a trick of the light, maybe exhaustion creeping into my mind. But I found myself checking the rearview mirror more than usual, watching for pale reflections, waiting. Second night, another sighting. Same shape, same spot, same exact time. 3:07 a.m. This time, it moved with confidence, its pale body absorbing every scrap of light my truck could throw at it. I floored the gas and didn't take my foot off until I'd put 10 miles between me and Grafton. The rest of the week passed with the same routine, and every night the sentinel stood somewhere along that stretch of highway, silent and unyielding. I tried talking about it at the diner. One of the regulars, a mechanic, listened quietly, eyes fixed on the table. He didn't laugh. "Don't stop for it," he warned. "Don't ever stop." The sixth night ended badly. The truck's engine sputtered violently when I hit the spot, every warning light blinking red. Testing the battery and the radio returned nothing but static. The sentinel watched from the shoulder, unmoving, as I killed the lights and waited in darkness, breath fogging in the freezing cab. The air buzzed, heavy with unspoken dread. Then, just as suddenly, the truck roared back to life. Seventh night, I swore I'd avoid Route 119 altogether. The job required me to run that stretch, no way around it. That evening, I arrived packed with caffeine and fear. The highway was emptier than usual, no other trucks, no cars in sight. 3:07 a.m., the dash. Clock ticked over as my headlights caught the sentinel, standing dead center in the road. It was bigger than before, tall as the cab itself, impossibly wide, faceless, body slick, and white. I hit the brakes. The truck skidded to a halt 40 feet away, tires screeching. I sat in paralysis as every gauge on the dash plummeted to zero, the radio bleeding static, the cab plunging into cold as the heater died. I reached for my phone, hands shaking, but the screen only flickered blue, unresponsive and dim. Silence pressed on me. The sentinel didn't move. I stared, fighting the urge to blink. Then it leaned forward, not walking, just shifting. A single movement that made the woods behind it bend away, as if afraid to touch its skin. I watched for specifics, for anything that could link it to a person or animal. But there was nothing. No face, no clothing, no sound. The longer I looked, the less it seemed part of the world. A shape cut from nightmares, too real to be imagined, too unnatural to exist. A car appeared behind me. Young driver, window rolled down, face pale as the sentinel's glare. He yelled, "Don't get out. It's not what you think." before swerving around me and vanishing into the mist. The sentinel didn't react. Minutes passed. Eventually, the pale shape slipped sideways into the woods, vanishing with no shadow, no disruption of the air. It had left me proof, a single white tuft caught on my grill, cold and rubbery to the touch. I bagged it and delivered my load to the yard, hands still trembling. I sent the sample for analysis, no match from any known animal or synthetic product. The tech wrote, "Not sure what you've got. Don't want to know." Now every time I drive that patch, I see movement in the trees, a shape that waits. No matter the time, no matter the weather, the sentinel keeps coming back, 7 nights in a row, never missing an appointment. Most nights, I keep the truck pointed straight, and the wheels moving stubbornly forward. Some threats you don't outrun, and some roads are haunted long before you ever set foot on them. I stopped asking people if they'd seen it. The ones who have never talk, and the ones who haven't don't believe. Route 119 is quieter these days. Fewer truckers, fewer jobs running that stretch. I get the feeling we're leaving it for whatever the sentinel's waiting for in those woods. That's fine by me. I've learned my lesson. Next time something impossibly large steps onto the road at 3:07 a.m., I won't stop. I won't ask questions. I'll just drive, engine roaring, hoping this time it stays in the woods and lets me go home. The forest is a map, but not one meant for people. I learned this the night the woods tried to swallow me whole. My name is Amaris. I used to believe every trail in the Cohuta wilderness had been mapped, every dangerous shortcut marked on a ranger's archive. Before that night, I thought human monsters belonged in news stories, far away from the green hush under Georgia's old-growth canopies. Maybe the woods heard me think it. Maybe that's why it happened to me. It was late March, and I'd gone hiking off-trail with 2 friends. The regular paths were crowded, so we let the pines eat up our phone signals and headed through the dense thicket looking for wild trillium blooms. The air was cold but not freezing. Perfect for moving without sweating. Perfect for ending up a bit further off course than you planned. We stumbled across the first wire buried in the yellowing grass. It was old, rusted, looped tight between 2 trees at shin height. One friend caught it with his boot, and it snapped. Not a break, but a clean pull as if someone had set it delicately to spring when it was disturbed. We laughed it off. City people in wild woods pretending not to care. Half an hour later, we started finding more. Wires strung at knee, then at waist, some so thin you couldn't see them until the sun caught a glint. At first, I thought it was spent hunting gear. Someone targeting coyotes, maybe. But none looked like any snare I'd seen. There were no tags, no marker tape, just naked metal waiting for a mistake. One friend wanted to turn back. Another saw it as an adventure. I let their arguments slide off me, staring at the trees and worrying about whose hand set the traps. We pressed on, careful now. Past a ridge, we found a pit, deep and covered in a flimsy blanket of leaves. An empty backpack rested in the hollow. There was a torn magazine, a broken flashlight, and nothing else. The woods grew quiet, uncanny quiet. No birds. Even the hum of insects faded. I caught myself listening for footsteps, wondering what was watching from between the green shadows. We decided not to split up. Every mistake felt like it could become the last. Passing through darker brush, we found wire strung at neck height, so thin the evening light barely revealed it. Beyond that, someone had staked branches upright and carved crude symbols into the bark. The smell of old smoke drifted through the pine duff. Something moved deeper in the woods. A flash of denim, gone before my eyes could focus, but real enough to send every sense flaring. My heart stuttered, and we froze. We waited. Nothing. Then, from the right, something snapped. A branch breaking. Not the random collapse of dead wood, but a footfall. Deliberate. We started back for the real trail. The wires seemed to multiply the faster we walked. Every step brought a new trip hazard, a fresh stretch of uncertainty. At the third pit, deeper, darker, We saw a blue tarp unraveling in a gust of wind. It revealed a crude frame made of branches, something like a cage. There was a ripped jacket atop the frame, a brand none of us recognized, torn at the sleeves. The sun dropped behind the ridgeline. I checked my phone. No signal, of course. We kept moving. The trail we'd blazed was gone, eaten up by darkness and confusion. Every stem looked identical, every hill a copy of the last. My friend called out, sudden, panicked, voice sharp. He'd stopped in front of another wire snare, this one looped around a broken branch like a noose. Above it, carved into the bark, humans. We didn't wait for the woods to catch up. We ran, stumbling, skin shredded by thorns and wire, legs aching from the unnatural terrain. Exiting the thicket, we crashed onto the trail, real, wide, marked by the gentle crunch of packed earth. The silence behind us deepened. We didn't look back. We hiked out without speaking, each nursing shallow cuts and bruises. The ranger who greeted us at the trailhead stared wide-eyed at the wire we'd wrapped up in a shirt. He said it wasn't for animals, not shaped or baited the right way. There are people who hunt the worst game, he told us quietly. Best you forget you ever saw this. Best you tell no one where it lies. I didn't feel safe for weeks. I checked windows, locked doors, watched tree-lined shadows curve around my apartment. Nights echoed with the creak of wire, the empty hunger of a forest that doesn't just host human monsters, but sometimes becomes them. Not every wilderness is mapped. Not every snare is set for deer, and not every trail leads back to safety. Some forests hide what we'd rather not know. The cohuta still pulls at me sometimes. It promises beauty, wild trillium, chilly spring air. But I hear the wires in the brush when the wind blows, and I remember that the woods are always more than we want them to be. Out there, someone, or something, remembers us. Out there, the hunt never really stops. A barking thunderstorm and a rusted, half-visible roof. Two things nobody expects to find together miles into the Nantahala backcountry. But what I remember most isn't the storm or the smell of moss and wet wood. It's what waited for me, just behind the glow of my lantern, in the heart of that unmarked cabin. My name is Barbara. I hike solo, driven by a restlessness that has never let me settle down or stay inside. It was late spring in North Carolina when I decided to take an old forest road deeper into the Nantahala than I'd ever been. Every guidebook warned the route was washed out, the forest likely impassable for heavy rain. I'd walked for hours under straight sheets of water, boots squelching, the trees hissing and pitching. The plan: to beat the forecast and set up camp before sundown. I lost the trail on a game path so faint it vanished behind me after 20 yards. When the wind picked up, I realized I'd gotten farther off than I'd meant and might have to settle for a night in the open. That's when I spotted it. A low, sagging cabin, mostly hidden by tangled mountain laurel. The structure was all wrong, logs swollen with wet, the roof drooping, windows tightly shuttered. No obvious path led there, just slick earth and patchy ferns. What really got me, though, was the way the storm seemed to hush the closer I got. The rain was still pouring, but under the porch overhang, everything was silent except for my own heartbeat. I hesitated by the door, more out of respect than fear, the sense you're trespassing on ground that remembers things you can't. My knuckles rapped twice, no answer. But something in me wanted shelter almost as much as I wanted the mystery solved. So I stepped inside. Inside, the cabin stank of wet wood, kerosene, old leather. Shadows devoured the corners no matter how I angled my lantern. The floor was warped and soft. A battered cot, cookware blackened by old flames, a broken kerosene lamp, the remains of someone's fleeting claim on this hidden place. My footsteps sounded unbearably loud. I set my dripping pack in the far corner and tried to settle in, telling myself the pounding in my chest was just the thrill of discovery. But that hush, unnatural pressing, never left. and little by little, other sounds crept in. Heavy footsteps outside, not quite muffled by moss, wet scuffs on the porch. I held my breath. Sure, I'd started imagining things. I listened to the rain, waited for the shifting darkness to become anything familiar. Then I heard my name, clear, soft, right at the edge of the window. My blood ran cold. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. Nobody knew to be in this particular lost pocket of woods. The voice called again, a little louder, closer to pleading, not angry or threatening, just desperately lost. The footsteps circled the cabin, slow and searching. Every time I thought they'd gone, they'd pass the door again. Sometimes they'd pause and I'd hear my name rise, through the clatter of rain, whispered with a longing that made my heart ache even as fear kicked in. I pressed myself against the rough logs, holding my breath. The room smelled wetter somehow, and the hush deepened. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I don't know how I managed not to scream. When dawn finally cracked the gray sky, every sign of the visitor was gone. No tracks in the mud, nothing broken or moved. I packed up and left, pushing through the brush so fast I ripped open my palms on thorn and splinter. When I finally reached a ranger station, I told them everything, even as embarrassment heated my cheeks. One of them, a man who'd worked there 40 years, grew very still. "You're not the first to talk of that hidden place," he told me. "Folks who find that cabin come out changed. Some think it calls you by name, so you'll join whoever's left behind in there." I don't hike Nantahala alone anymore. Sometimes when it storms, I dream of heavy footsteps and soft voices calling from outside the window, begging to come in. I've moved clear across the state, but when the weather's right, that old hush drapes itself over my new place, and I wake with the taste of moss and shadow in my mouth. People say there are no secrets in these woods, only stories waiting to be found. I know better now. Some stories find you, call you by name, and keep part of you locked up in the dark long after you leave. A coppery tang hung in the thick spring air, more animal than mineral, more warning than scent. I still taste it whenever the wind shifts and the world goes oddly silent, as if the woods themselves are holding their breath. My name is Bellamy. I've always been a wanderer, drawn to places maps only hint at, old logging trails, forgotten ridge lines, bends in the Cumberland Plateau, where even the locals hesitate to venture after dusk. My own rules have always been simple. Go prepared, respect what's wild, and never assume you've seen or smelled everything. That evening, the plateau shimmered with late sunlight, and the promise of a storm crouched somewhere miles away. The world had just turned lush, rain-pummeled hollows crowded by ferns and blooming laurel and that vivid Appalachian green you only see after the thaw. I was days into a solo trek following a deer trail toward a rumored waterfall, a place I'd seen on old survey maps but never in person. Nothing felt wrong at first, even as a thick, almost metallic smell drifted over me, a scent I'd learned to associate with copperhead dens or wounded animals. I chalked it up to muddy creek beds or some old, rusted trap hidden under leaves. Only when the ground changed, turning not just damp, but almost spongy and yielding, did I slow down and really listen. That's the first rule in these woods. If the birds go quiet, you should too. The silence arrived the way it always does, abrupt and total. One moment the air was full of trill and squabble. The next there was just the soft churning of my boots and the distant splatter of a branch flicking water. Even the wind seemed to vanish, as if the hollow itself had sealed me in. I stopped, wiped sweat from my brow, and watched the shadows congeal between the trees. The copper scent thickened, hanging over the world like a warning. That's when I noticed my arms, the fine light hair standing upright, my skin suddenly tight with old animal fear. It wasn't just the silence. The woods had grown colder, and the air pressed close, making every breath feel measured and heavy. I shook it off, pressed on, swatting at gnats, and glancing over my shoulder every few minutes. An old logging road appeared underfoot, scarcely more than a pair of ruts trailing through saplings like thin scars. The trees here looked blighted. Their bark was slick and unnaturally dark, stripes like old burns crisscrossing at odd angles. My boots squelched through thick mossy mulch, and the copper smell pulsed stronger with every step. Halfway to the creek, I noticed something else, my boots leaving no mark on the ground. Wherever I stepped, the moss sprang back, flawless, as if denying any sign of my presence. Most folks would head back. I pressed on, curiosity and stubbornness louder than sense. That's when I tripped. I put a hand out to break my fall and touched something cold and slick. A chunk of stone or metal buried deep in the moss. As I rolled over, pain stabbed my palm. Pulling it back, I saw a thin, precise red cut beating up on my skin. The blood smelled wrong, sharper, copperier than it should. I wrapped my hand and tried to mark the spot, but the rock seemed to blur at the edges, a strange mirror-bright surface that rippled in the failing light. The woods dimmed. When I finally glanced at my compass, the needle spun in quick, dizzying circles. No bearing at all, the territory suddenly mapless. I could feel something watching, but it wasn't the hot, prickly feeling of a deer's eyes or some hidden coyote. The woods themselves felt watchful, as if the old trees were leaning in. I pressed deeper, determined now to find water and set camp before panic set in. Night fell too fast. The air thickened with that metallic perfume. All at once, I noticed that my small cuts, the one on my palm, a scrape on my shin, had stopped bleeding. Worse, the skin had started knitting together, fusing shut as though nothing had happened. Not just healing, but closing over too perfectly, leaving faint silvery lines that weren't there an hour before. Confused, I checked again in my flashlight's beam. The cuts, the bruises I'd picked up on fallen branches, all gone. My skin looked new, the hair standing even higher, and the copper smell now seemed to come from me. The silence returned, deeper than before. A soft rustle, a shape sliding just behind my vision. My breath clouded. Something moved in the periphery, heavy where nothing should be. I turned, caught a fleeting glimpse. A shape darker than the dark, taller than a man, with edges that slid and flickered like heat rising from pavement. I heard nothing, yet felt vibration through the soil, something sighing, vast and subterranean. A voice, not words but deep inside my skull, thrummed a warning I didn't understand. I staggered, suddenly cold, the forest whirling around me with odd, lurching speed. Next thing I knew, dawn stretched pale across the woods. I sat beside the stream I'd been looking for, boots and clothes soaked, skin spotless except for those new, silvered scars. My gear was packed, as if I'd never stopped walking. No memory bridged the hours between dusk and daylight. The wounds never came back, not that day, not in the months since. But sometimes, when the plateau goes quiet and rain sweeps down the ridges, my joints ache in places I never injured. The silvery lines on my arms burn cold, and the copper scent floods my mouth. Some mornings, I wake convinced there's something else moving under my skin, something that doesn't belong. People laugh when I bring it up at the feed store or over beers outside town. They shrug off the silence in those woods, the way animals steer clear, the way old scars fade the more time you spend up there. But sometimes an old-timer will listen, nod once, and mutter about the history under these hills, about things older than the mines, older than memory, buried so deep even the trees pretend to forget. I went back one more time, last fall. There was nothing but moss and shadow, the air impossibly still. My footprints vanished behind me, like I'd never existed at all. If you hike the plateau and the air tastes like pennies, if the woods go perfectly silent, turn back. You may come home changed, or something might come home in your place. I still walk those hills, but never at dusk, never after a cut. The silver lines glow sometimes, in the cold, and the coppery taste is always waiting for me when I least expect it. Static creeps in like a cold, unseen fog out on the dolly sods. It starts subtle, the chirp of a radio gone silent, my compass spinning wild, a tingle crawling up the back of my scalp I know better than to ignore. My name is Zechariah. I'm a ranger, 3 seasons patrolling the wildest edges of West Virginia, where weather and memory both get lost if you're not sharp. Some days here feel older than bones, but the valley below Raven Ridge, locals call it Static Valley, is where I learned the forest can turn on your sense of what's real, and you may never know what it takes from you until you're home and changed. The warnings were already there if I'd paid better attention. Radios and phones flickering off, not just for minutes but hours. Devices drained, GPS vanishing from screens. Stories, always secondhand. A hiker, certain he saw someone he'd buried years before. A married couple who returned to the trailhead with the wrong calendar on their phones. Old men in Petersburg muttering about the Echo Valley and not wanting to talk about the photographs. Mine began with a missing persons call. 3 hikers, late September, blue tent, last spotted by the bare rocks. I'd walked that high plateau dozens of times. Open fields drenched with wind and sun. The blind turns where bare spruce shivered together. But when you drop down into the backcountry, the terrain folds up on itself and every step seems stacked with fog and shadows. Smoke in the air that morning, the sort that shouldn't be there. Phones died as soon as we hit the saddle. A heavy black screen, not low battery, just cut off. I dismissed it as stubborn cloud cover or solar flares. I noted the first unease but kept moving. The valley entrance was a scar in the brush, alder and birch crowding in on all sides. My backup and I, another ranger, big and capable, silent, barely spoke as we followed the cairn line south. My compass started swinging at the halfway mark, and for the first time I noticed how every tree looked more like the last. My skin prickled. I thought of all those stories scoffed at now crawling into my head. Then we started catching snatches of voices on the wind. It was wrong. Wind shouldn't carry sound in this bowl, not like that. I thought I heard my brother call from the ravine below, not my partner, not a hiker's shout, but my brother's voice, clear as day. He's been dead 6 years, never set foot in dolly sods. I froze. Leaves moved, blurring gray, and I saw a flicker of plaid, the shirt he wore at his funeral, ducking behind spruce trunks. My partner tapped my shoulder, insisting we keep moving. He looked pale, sweating, his radio dangling uselessly. "Heard anything?" he whispered. I lied and said no. We found the blue tent, half collapsed, zipped from the inside. 3 backpacks, food scattered like they'd left in a hurry, no sign of a struggle. Our radios made a squeal, just static and faint echoes. When I pressed the distress button, the device sparked, burning my glove. It all started coming faster after that. The sky darkened, not as if from approaching night, but as if someone turned down the world's brightness. My compass whip-cracked again. The valley narrowed, swallowing us whole. My head buzzed, voices rolled in and out. My grandmother calling from her porch, my old dog half-remembered TV jingles, things I knew were dead or never real. We saw movement far off in the trees, figures darting, all wrong in motion, blurred, like jitter on old film. My partner called out too loud, and the wind died. We heard nothing after that, not even our own heavy breathing. Toward what should have been dusk, we found a battered camera, its nylon strap knotted with blood. The photos it held chilled me more than anything the forest showed. Picture after picture of the missing hikers, each shot a little more distorted, their faces screaming, hands flung up as if to ward off something out of frame. Dozens of frames, different timestamps, but always within the same hour, 4:05 p.m., looping. I wanted to say it was a trick of the camera, but the way the woods spun around us, I knew what the pictures captured. Not just the moment, but the trap. We made it out just after nightfall. I remember crawling up to my truck, my partner shaking like he was hypothermic, both of us with blackout holes in our memory. When I went back the next day, officially for the report, the valley looked normal again. GPS worked, though it marked our missing hours as a straight, perfect line through the woods. Impossible. The hikers were never found. The cameras made it to evidence, but no one in the field could bear to review the memory cards more than once. Some nights, I dream about that valley. Static crawling in under my skin, my brother's voice breaking into old, familiar songs just out of earshot. Every time my radio sputters or my phone dies, my hand clenches, and I half expect to see that jumbled line of trees and the same screaming faces stamped again and again, always at the witching hour. I keep the old compass on my desk, the needle spinning, a souvenir of a place where your senses and your memories are just suggestions. In Dolly Sods, the thing that breaks might not be your device. It might be your mind, handed back to you wrong, with something missing in the static. The stones sing out here if you listen long enough. Between midnight and the colorless hour before dawn, the whole gorge vibrates with a music that feels older than this part of the world. My name is Darian. Maybe if I'd listened to the warnings, old-timer stories, half-smirking park rangers, the little signs nobody puts in the guidebooks, I wouldn't have found myself with a tent zipped up shivering 10 yards from the choir. The locals warn not to camp near those boulder stacks in New River Gorge, not if you value undisturbed dreams. To most, the stories are superstition, a way to keep tourists from spoiling secret cliff views. But the night I heard the stones themselves harmonize, I stopped being a skeptic. It started simply. I was out for solitude and clear night photos, chasing the Perseids. A cluster of strange, rounded boulders drew my curiosity, rising in trios and quartets, half buried in wild grass. They looked like toothless mouths or the broken pipes of some giant organ. By 2 a.m, after the last shutter click, I crawled into my sleeping bag and tried to let the song of the river lull me asleep. Instead, I woke, bolt upright, adrenaline humming, clock reading 2:47. The tent vibrated beneath me. The air felt thick, every taproot and pebble humming in harmony, as if the whole gorge pulsed with sound too deep to hear. Outside, the choir sang. It started as a low murmur, an impossible fluctuation between music and animal, between mountain wind and something deliberate. Not wind, not rain. Harmonic tones built in layers, as if the boulders themselves were vibrating, each stone a tongue, each surface a drum. I knelt outside, barefoot in damp grass. Every rational part of me wanted to run, but the song pulled me forward. A steady, invisible nudge, the kind you feel rather than hear, burrowing into bone and marrow. Something primal inside me reacted. My eyes watered, ears pressed tight to my head, heart racing in a way that felt almost worshipful. I tried to film, but the phone seized up, video stuttering, battery draining instantly. A strange compulsion gripped me. My fingers tingled, mind fogged. One step, then another. A pressure, a need, pushed me to reach out, touch the largest boulder, the one at the center. The music peaked, sharpened, split into discordant shrieks. Pain shot through my skull like an electric current. I must have screamed, my own voice lost under the overwhelming song. Then I blacked out. I awoke at dawn, lying hard against the stones, the world spinning, and my head pounding worse than any fever. Blood clotted in my ears. The pain in my forearms was sharp and new. I looked down and saw shapes, symbols, lines, impossible curves, carved with brutal precision into my skin, crusted red but still oozing. The memories came in flashes, standing trance-like, using a pointed rock to scratch alien patterns across my arms and wrists, all while the stone's impossible harmony roared through my skull. The pull wasn't just physical. There had been something in my head, a message transmitted by vibration, instructions I no longer understood. I staggered away, delirious, and stumbled into a pair of hikers at sunrise. Their frightened faces and the drying blood down my arms told them all they needed. I was airlifted out. At the hospital, they asked me why I'd done it, how I'd managed not to pass out from the pain. They called psych, but my mind was clear except for the music's bruised echo. The scars never faded. They form strange letters, none of them matching any language, not even ancient glyphs. In moments of fever, I almost remember what they mean. My discharge papers say psychogenic fugue. The Rangers don't go up to the boulders at night anymore, not after my story, and what happened to a pair of missing locals 2 weeks later. Research teams came. They set up microphones and sensors to record the singing stones. The gear picked up subsonic tones no animals, no weather could explain. Then the hard drives scrubbed themselves blank. Hours of bright red static and digital stutter. Now I sleep with music on. Every night, anything to drown out the memory of the stones in the dark. Sometimes I catch myself humming the forgotten melody, and my arms prickle, those symbols burning cold against the skin. I can't warn you to stay away. Not really. The gorge has always drawn the curious, the ones hungry for the old music that lives just under rock and river. But if you hear the stones singing, if your heartbeat sinks to theirs, do not reach out. Do not try to understand. Turn back while you still remember who you are. Or someday you'll wake up with a stranger's scars and a melody you will never get out of your head. To enter a dead mine in Kentucky is to walk into a history the land itself prefers not to speak. Every step you take, the mountain hums with old secrets, sometimes in warning, sometimes in hunger. My name is Salvatore, and I should have known better than to follow the old rail grade past Elkhorn City after rain. The town sits at the mouth of hollows and abandoned tunnels, stories leaking out of both like the mist that clings to the ridgelines come dawn. I'd been hunting for bits of lost rail, metal detector humming, hoping for coins or a spike, anything for the display cases at the museum. It wasn't adventure or greed, just an inherited restlessness and a love for roots, family, coal, the uncanny. The shaft I entered had been closed since the 1970s, barred but not welded. I wasn't alone. 2 friends trailed behind, both experienced, both holding better sense than me, but unable to resist the chance to see something nobody's seen in generations. We slipped past the twisted gate, headlamps barely cutting back the stained air, voices dampened by the immense hush. The old mine was vast, caving in places, air thick with rot and old, cold water dripping somewhere deep, levels twisted on themselves, rails vanishing into pits, ladders slick with ooze. Passing the 3rd junction, I noticed something strange, a pattern of indentations in the wall, as if something massive and soft had pressed along the sandstone, leaving tracks like knotted rope. I wanted to turn back, but curiosity works like a magnet underground. On a shelf of black rock above shoulder height, we found a scattering of skins, translucent, human-sized, brittle as shed snakeskin but shaped wrong. Too thick at the midsection, no scales. One curled around a rusted shovel, fused like wax. Just mud and mold, one of us said. I didn't believe it, but I agreed. As we pressed deeper, my friend's detector squealed, then died, battery full but no power. All 3 lights flickered. The air grew warmer, almost close enough to taste, and the tunnel walls seemed to breathe. A faint swelling and shrinking, like an enormous chest beneath a stone. A rush of moving air swept past, tinged with ammonia and iron, rippling the shredded skins. Something huge tunneled further in. A writhing, segmented shadow, its silhouette moving with mindless purpose. No eyes, no mouth, only the sense of tremendous need, like a muscle endlessly flexing. We ran. It chased the echoes, not us, but the sound of its mass slithering off the floor. A heavy, wet, fast-moving thing burned into our ears. We nearly trampled each other, scrambling through a narrow breach and out into a side tunnel. Only when the thing's movement faded did we realize we'd dropped our packs. including the camera. Regrouping in the late shaft, we recovered just enough nerve to grab the bag and flee, but not before glimpsing the main chamber, an impossible network of tunnels, walls warm to the touch, pulsing and expanding, hundreds more shed skins draped over collapsed beams, the glow of damp, milky eggs the size of footballs. Back in the open, daylight never felt so artificial. Our phones worked again. We gaped at the photos. Many were a blur of movement or blank black, but a handful showed what we'd seen. Coils brighter than the lamp's reach, eggs, and, chillingly, what looked like a human hand, half encased in wrapping, fingers melting into segment after segment. We reported everything to the rescue team, a mix of local authorities and wildlife experts. The next day, news came. The chamber had collapsed overnight, blocking every side passage we'd entered. The rescue camera, lowered after, came up covered in a viscous silvery residue. DNA testing was inconclusive, with one technician whispering reptilian, but with errors no one could explain. They took our story and our photos, but word trickled back to us that the evidence had been filed as equipment malfunction and molting animal activity. A week later, a local hunter's dog went missing up the same hollow. No search party was formed. Months have passed. I still help at the museum, but I check the mines less and less. Nightmares remain. The sensation of those eggs pulsing, the sound of flesh and stone fused together, burrowing, hungry, waiting. Sometimes I catch a whiff of that ammonia on the west wind, and I remember how the mountain felt warmer underfoot, like something big and old had merely rolled over in its sleep as we passed. If you ever wander near Elkhorn after a rain and the mountain feels alive beneath your boots, turn back. Whatever's breeding under there, it's bigger and older than any history the town puts on a plaque. And it doesn't care who remembers it, so long as we keep our distance and forget the sound of its breathing. But I haven't. And now I'm not sure I'm truly outside anymore. At night, I feel something moving beneath my skin, each heartbeat sinking to the pulse of earth on the verge of birthing nightmares again. Something is wrong with the trees here. They lean in close, their bark pocked and glistening like raw hide, trunks pulsing with unseen veins. Stranger still are the things they keep and change, quiet as a hospital and as hungry as an open wound. My name is Jericho. I study fungi and plant disease for the Forest Service, and I always imagined the real horror in the wild would be human. A poacher's gun, a lost hiker found too late. I never guessed it would be the forest itself turning, not hostile, but something much harder to accept. Alive in ways we were never meant to witness. The call came in from Monongahela after the third complaint in a month. Hikers had reported a patch of woodland where the air was wrong, where animals refused to go, and one even described seeing tree bark with the texture of skin. The Forest Service worried about disease, a new pathogen maybe, or a chemical spill twisting the environment. My job was to investigate, to photograph, to sample, and then, if need be, to document what the woods had become. The hike-in was unremarkable. Air heavy with rot, the damp smell of moss, late spring sunlight seeping through a tight green canopy. The trail grew soft beneath my boots, caving where rain had churned up the duff. No birds, no squirrels. The place felt vacuum-sealed like the hush after a snowfall. Even stranger, there was no wind high in the trees, just an unbroken quiet that prickled beneath my jacket. An hour in, my boots found mud. Another step, and I sank past my ankle in dark, chill earth. Every tree was different here. The trunks bulged and folded, and there was a faint, fleshy ruddiness to certain patches, almost pink, where the bark split. At first, I told myself it was cottonwood swollen by fungus, maybe a leaf gall gone wild, but that didn't explain the smell, wet and animal as a slaughterhouse. I pulled out my camera. Close up, the bark showed no familiar pattern, no ridges or scales. Instead, it looked like the flesh of the inside of your lip, thin, slightly oily, ridged with blood vessels. I touched a trunk through my nitrile gloves, warm, supple, and yielding to the touch, not like wood. The tree trembled, a slight motion under my hand, and the tips of new leaves twitched as if tugged by a hidden pulse. The further I trekked, the worse it got. The grove narrowed into a corridor, mud sticking to my boots, and that scent, metallic, sweet-sick, thickened. I found animal bones set into the roots of one thicker tree, vertebrae fused where bark and marrow joined, half absorbed, as if the forest were reclaiming flesh for itself. A little farther on, a deer carcass lay half swallowed by a trunk, hair matted and eyes gone, one length of back leg joined to the bark by a pulpy web of mycelium and new cambium. I knelt, snapped photos. The camera whined protest, batteries draining fast. My gloves smeared red on the lens. Goosebumps rose along my arms as a rash began to creep beneath the suit, itching, burning. I tried to ignore it, science first, panic after. Panic came soon enough. Deeper in the grove, the air pressed heavy. I scraped a sliver from one tree, warm, pale, and streaked with faint blue veins, almost like the underside of a wrist. Just as I tucked it into a plastic tube, the wind kicked up and the trees leaned. Not moving in the way wood should, but flexing. A ripple of movement, as if they all drew breath together for the first time in centuries. I found a second way out, stumbling through the brush to the trail, lungs thick with the scent of mushrooms and decay. There was no animal sound, no bird, only my own ragged breathing and the wet slap of leaves against my face. I coughed up fluid tinged pink at the edges. Back in the truck, I peeled the gloves and suit free, tossing them onto the seat. My hands were raw, skin webbing with faint white hyphae. I tried not to touch anything, dialing the local Forest Service supervisor with shaking fingers. The patch was soon quarantined, made off limits as a conservation area. Scientists came from 3 universities. Some brought sterilized suits, others full hazmat gear. They collected samples, filled out reports, drew boundary lines. Yet every week someone got sick, and every month the patch of flesh trees seemed just a little bigger. The rash on my hands turned to weeping lesions. I visited doctors, a dozen, then more. Each time they cut away the skin, the edges grew back thicker, paler, more pocked and sensitive. Antibiotics did nothing. Steroids made it worse. When I returned to Monongahela for a follow-up, the trees had grown new branches that curled toward me as I passed, their leaves flecked with streaks of red that looked too much like blood. Not long after, a second set of lesions appeared along one thigh, then across my shoulders. 3 other researchers veined with the same pallor, the same soft white network under their skin. We compared wounds and photos. Someone joked about going back to the trees. Nobody laughed. The Federal Service marked the area with warning tape, and a sharp-faced official from D.C. ordered everyone out. They posted guards, but the guards grew sick too. The same fungal webbing under their nails, spotted teeth beneath the gum line. We all felt something growing, not just in the woods, but in us, eager to move beyond bark, shell, or skin. I write this with gloved hands, curtains drawn. The lesions pulse, aching when thunder booms, or when I dream of forests that breathe and remember. At times, I feel tiny roots stirring beneath my scars, and the urge to walk outside, to feel the wind, and slide my hands along the nearest trunk is nearly more than I can bear. Monongahela keeps its secret still. I get emails sometimes, new hikers' rashes, new trees added to the quarantine zone, fresh bones turning up in the roots. Some things go back to the earth in the usual way. Others are simply claimed by something older, waiting and quietly, hungry under the skin of the forest itself. In the woods, you learn to expect anything. Freak lightning storms, panther screams, midnight tornadoes barreling down the hollow. But nothing prepares you for an unmarked helicopter, black as pitch and silent as snowfall, settling between the trees like nightmare landing gear. That's when you realize the most dangerous things out here may not be natural at all. My name is Mitchell. I spent 20 years hiking and documenting oddities in the Cherokee National Forest, Tennessee. Mossy sinkholes, ancient stone circles, the usual folklore playgrounds for the curious. Never in all my time had I felt truly threatened, mystified maybe, or unsettled by things too old and strange to name, but not in direct, life-altering fear. That changed the night the helicopters came. It started as a perfectly ordinary spring hike, one of those head-clearing treks before the traffic and tourists of summer. I was 3 miles from the old trailhead, following an animal path under the first bright stars, when the night split open with flickering shadows. No roar, no thudding rotors. These helicopters glided in low, matte black, all but invisible, except for the haunted way the trees bent under their downdraft. I stopped, holding my breath, flattening against a rotting log. Out stepped men in hazmat gear, their faces hidden behind mirrored masks. Their movements were silent, disciplined, a practiced, secretive efficiency that made it obvious this was not military training. I watched, heart pounding, as a figure pointed a rod at the ground and swept a wide circle, tracing radiation with a yellow-green glow. Another called into a radio, words muffled. Moments later, the searchlights came, blinding columns of white spearing through the black. That's when I saw the crater, raw, still steaming, 10 feet wide and half as deep, burnt earth glinting dully under debris that didn't look like stone or metal, but something alive, or once alive. A fractured, carapace-like shell, blue-green and laced with metallic veins. Suddenly, those same men surrounded me. One barked a clipped order. My flashlight was yanked away, my boots zip-tied, hands forced behind my back. My mind stuttered. Was I in real danger? Was I about to disappear? They didn't hurt me. Instead, they questioned me for what felt like hours, about everything I'd seen, my route, my equipment, my contacts right down to my favorite brand of coffee. I answered honestly, too shocked not to. The only time their discipline broke was when I mentioned the crater's color. One guard's head snapped toward me, fists tightening around his baton. They confiscated my bag, my camera, every scrap of digital evidence. I was marched up the ridge, my GPS thrown into a creek, my map shredded in my face. With chilling efficiency, they shoved a thick yellow envelope into my hands. A notice of required silence, it said in official, impersonal print. Somewhere in the meaningless legal text, it forbade me from discussing anomalous aerial activity or recovered matter, and threatened federal charges should I so much as phone a friend with my story. I was left on a forest road at dawn, boots muddy, head ringing, skin tingling with the dread that comes from seeing your world rewritten. You might think that's where it ended, but the real horror grew in my dreams, and in the invasive, relentless pressure that followed for weeks. Black SUVs idling near my house, letters with no return address warning me to decline all interviews. The sensation of being watched, hot, prickling every time I stepped into the woods. For days I couldn't sleep, and when I did, I saw the crater again, but bigger, with things moving just under the crust, eyes, or maybe lights peering out. Sometimes, just before waking, I heard a language I didn't know whispering at the base of my spine. I kept thinking about the shell, the way it looked almost like the inner carapace of a cicada, but plated, iridescent, with ridges that seemed to pulse when you stared too long. Something not machine, not animal, but both. I spoke to no one, stuck to my silence, but not for their sake. Some things felt too big, too dangerous, and too close to the surface. Weeks passed until the agents came to my door, polite, implacable, tidy in the way that means they have all day and all the authority they need. They asked me to sign another stack of forms, words blurring until all that remained were the warnings at the end. Penalties for talking, for speculating, for showing even the smallest scrap of evidence to anyone, even my family. After they left, I noticed a line of burnt grass down the center of my front yard and a metallic taste that clung to everything I ate. I never found my original camera, my boots, or my map. Occasionally, I still wander the Cherokee at dawn, always alone, drawn to the place where the world seemed thinner. Nothing feels right there now. The air buzzes cold, birds go silent, and sometimes I find what looks like silvery scales or bone fragments just beneath the leaves. I never keep them. Other hikers have vanished in the area since, according to threads buried deep in hiker forums, but the official line is accidents, weather, the usual explanations. I'm not sure what landed that night, if it was a craft, a life form, or an artifact from times before ours. But I know our government is afraid, and I know it's still out there, changing the woods. Sometimes late at night, when the power flickers and I glimpse headlights through the curtains, I remember mirrored faces, the bright hiss of the searchlight, and the warning that what's buried in the earth doesn't always stay gone. If you're ever hiking deep in the Cherokee and you hear a helicopter overhead, don't just take cover. Get out. Don't take photos. Don't leave a trace behind. Our forests have their secrets, and sometimes those secrets are guarded at gunpoint. If this story sent a chill down your spine or made you question what's waiting in your own patch of woods, subscribe to Hauntededfears on YouTube. Your next nightmare could be just a click away.